The first sound of Evelyn Vale's rebellion was the violent rip of ivory silk. The second was the hiss of her own breath as the diamond-studded corset refused to release her lungs. She stood before a wall of mirrors in the bridal suite, 25 years old, breathtakingly beautiful, and one breath away from committing a crime against the most expensive wedding dress ever made in Lumina Heights. The gown had taken 7 designers, 14 seamstresses, and one unbearably dramatic consultant to create. According to the consultant, it represented purity, legacy, and feminine surrender. According to Evelyn, it represented suffocation with embroidery. She jammed the point of a silver letter opener beneath the corset ties. Outside the locked doors, her mother's personal assistant was explaining tomorrow's bridal schedule in the tone of a prison administrator. Hair begins at 6, skin preparation at 6:15, photographs at 7:30. The ceremonial veil must not be touched without gloves. Evelyn sawed harder. A pearl snapped free and bounced across the marble floor. The bride should also avoid excessive liquids after midnight. "That will not be a problem," Evelyn muttered. "The bride is leaving." The corset split. Air flooded her lungs so suddenly that she nearly laughed. She tore the ruined bodice away, stepped over a mountain of silk, and pulled on black riding trousers hidden beneath the velvet bench. A fitted shirt followed. Then boots. Then the worn leather jacket she had smuggled into the bridal wing inside a hat box labeled heirloom lace. Her reflection changed with every movement. The fragile society princess disappeared. In her place stood the woman the tabloids had never managed to find. Sharp gray eyes, loose blonde hair, a dangerous curve to her mouth, a faint smear of grease across one wrist from the motorcycle she had rebuilt in secret beneath the estate's western greenhouse. She looked alive. A knock sounded. "Miss Vale?" Evelyn grabbed the small pack waiting behind the curtains. "Miss Vale, your mother would like confirmation that you are resting." "I am resting," Evelyn called. It was technically true. She had never felt more rested in her life. She crossed to the balcony, swung one leg over the stone rail, and looked down 3 stories. The old ivy trellis shivered against the wall. It had survived 80 years of storms, 2 renovations, and 1 drunken senator at a summer gala. Evelyn decided it could survive her. She climbed down quickly, boots finding narrow ledges in the darkness. Halfway to the ground, a strip of torn wedding silk caught on the railing above and fluttered like a surrender flag. Evelyn kept moving. The estate grounds spread below her in carefully controlled perfection. Pale fountains, sculpted hedges, security lamps, armed guards stationed at every gate, because tomorrow's wedding was not merely a marriage. It was a treaty between one of the wealthiest human dynasties in the country and the most powerful wolf pack in the north. Everyone called it the wedding of the century. Evelyn called it a beautifully catered execution. She dropped into the rose garden, crouched behind a stone bench, and waited for a pair of guards to pass. They were watching the outer wall. Nobody thought to watch the bride. That mistake cost them. She slipped through the greenhouse, unlocked the hidden service door, and entered the maintenance garage. Her motorcycle waited beneath a gray canvas cover, heavy and black, built for speed rather than elegance. She pulled off the cover. "Hello, darling." The machine gleamed beneath the low lights. Unlike her future husband, it had never been accused of being a bloodthirsty barbarian. It also had better manners. Evelyn wheeled it silently through the rear service lane. Only when the estate walls were behind her did she swing onto the seat and start the engine. The roar shattered the night. Lights flared across the grounds. A shout rose behind her. Evelyn smiled, lowered her visor, and accelerated. By the time the first security vehicle reached the service gate, she was already tearing through the hills beyond the estate. Wedding silk still clinging to one boot. Across Lumina Heights, Tristan Blackwood was enduring his own form of ceremonial torture. "Hold still," the tailor said. "I have been holding still for 43 minutes. Your shoulders are unusually broad. I was unaware they had changed since yesterday." The tailor swallowed and adjusted the measuring tape around Tristan's chest. 3 security officers stood near the door of the private fitting chamber. 2 more waited in the corridor. Beyond them, senior members of the Northern Pack occupied the hotel's entire upper floor, ensuring that their alpha reached the altar without incident. They were not concerned he might be attacked. They were concerned he might escape. Their concern was justified. Tristan stood 6 feet 4 inches tall, fiercely muscular, and visibly irritated by the tuxedo being constructed around him. His dark hair had been combed into submission. His jaw was clean-shaven. His expression suggested he was considering declaring war on formal wear. A crystal tray beside him held cufflinks, ceremonial pins, and the heavy black signet ring of the Northern Alpha. He looked at it with the enthusiasm of a man studying a handcuff. "Will the bride wear white?" one of his advisors asked. Tristan stared at him. The advisor cleared his throat. "Of course she will. Traditional, delicate, very suitable." Tristan's mouth tightened. Everything he knew about Evelyn Vale had been delivered through gossip columns, diplomatic reports, and the careful insults of people who claimed to admire her. She was beautiful, spoiled, fragile, famous for fainting at charity dinners and crying when photographers used the wrong angle, a weeping porcelain doll, and tomorrow she would become his mate by contract. The wolf inside him had been restless for months, offended by the arrangement and irritated by the absence of any true mating instinct. Tristan did not want a decorative wife who feared him. He did not want to spend his life lowering his voice so she would not tremble, hiding his strength so she would not faint, and apologizing every time someone repeated another exaggerated story about Northern brutality. He wanted one night in which nobody expected anything from him. No treaty, no pack, no bride, just music. The tailor turned to select another pin. Tristan moved. He stepped off the platform, lifted his coat from a chair, and walked toward the side door. One security officer frowned. "Alpha? I need air. We can clear the balcony. I need air that has not been approved by a committee." The officer shifted into his path. Tristan looked down at him. The officer stepped aside. Unfortunately, the corridor beyond contained 4 more guards. Tristan opened the service door instead. 10 minutes later, he crossed the underground garage wearing black trousers, an open-collared white shirt, and the expression of a man escaping a hostage negotiation. He selected the oldest vehicle in his private collection, a low silver sports car restored by hand and kept free of tracking equipment because modern electronics offended its engineering. His chief of security appeared at the far end of the garage. "Alpha Blackwood." Tristan opened the driver's door. "You cannot leave tonight." "That sounds like a challenge. The council will notice. Then distract them." "With what?" Tristan glanced toward the hotel. "Tell them I objected to the floral arrangements." His chief stared. That should occupy them until dawn. He slid behind the wheel and started the engine. The vintage car came alive with a deep mechanical growl. Tristan drove past the raised barrier before anyone decided whether stopping him was worth losing an arm. It was not. Lumina Heights changed after midnight. The towers of the financial district still glittered, but the streets beneath them belonged to insomniacs, musicians, lovers, and people running from tomorrow. Human neighborhoods blended into packed territories, then softened into the neutral city zone where old treaties forbade political claims. Evelyn reached it first. She left her motorcycle in an alley behind an unmarked brick building and removed her helmet. Her hair fell around her shoulders in wild blonde waves. She could still feel the corset's pressure around her ribs, a phantom cage that loosened with every step. At the end of the alley, a narrow staircase descended below street level. A brass plaque beside the door read, "The Velvet Room." No photographers waited outside. No security scanners guarded the entrance. Only a broad doorman in a burgundy vest, who took one look at Evelyn's leather jacket and the scrap of bridal silk hanging from her boot. "Interesting evening? You should see the other dress." He opened the door. Warm darkness folded around her. The Velvet Room existed beneath the city like a secret heartbeat. Amber lamps glowed against exposed brick. Blue smoke drifted above small, round tables. A pianist moved through a slow, aching melody, while a woman on stage sang in a voice soft enough to make strangers remember people they had tried to forget. Evelyn stopped at the bottom of the stairs. This was what freedom sounded like. Not roaring engines, not breaking locks, a trumpet breathing in the dark. She crossed to the long walnut bar and chose the last empty stool. The bartender approached, polishing a glass. "Bourbon," she said. "Which kind? The kind that makes tomorrow seem fictional." He poured generously. Evelyn lifted the glass, inhaled oak and smoke, and took one burning swallow. A minute later, the door opened behind her. She did not turn immediately. She felt him first. The room changed in some subtle, impossible way. Conversations softened. The wolf-blooded patrons looked up and then carefully looked away. A controlled force moved down the stairs, not threatening, but too powerful to ignore. Evelyn glanced toward the mirror behind the bar. The man reflected there was enormous. He wore no jacket, only a white shirt stretched across a broad chest and powerful shoulders. His dark hair was slightly disordered, as though someone had styled it, and he had immediately run a hand through it. He was devastatingly handsome in a severe, uncompromising way. Strong jaw, straight nose, deep-set blue eyes that scanned exits, shadows, and every person between the door and the bar. Then those eyes found hers in the mirror. The contact struck with astonishing force. Evelyn's fingers tightened around her glass. The stranger paused. For one suspended second, neither of them moved. Something inside her leaned toward him. It was not trust. She was far too intelligent for that. It was recognition without memory. Then he walked to the bar and took the stool beside her. Up close, he seemed even larger. His sleeve brushed her leather jacket, and heat passed through the contact. The bartender approached. "Single malt," the stranger said. "Neat." His voice was low and controlled, polished enough for a boardroom and rough enough to suggest the board should behave. Evelyn took another sip of bourbon. He glanced at her boot. "You appear to have been attacked by a curtain." She looked down at the trailing silk. "It started the fight." His mouth shifted slightly. Not quite a smile. "Did you win?" "I escaped." Victory is a matter of perspective. The bartender placed his drink down. The stranger inspected the rim before touching it. Evelyn noticed. "Afraid the glass might bite?" "I prefer knowing where things have been. You came to an underground bar in the neutral zone." "A temporary lapse in judgment," she smiled. "You do look like a man who schedules his lapses." He turned toward her fully. The force of his attention was almost physical. "And you look like a woman who sets schedules on fire. Only the boring ones." His gaze moved over the jacket, the riding trousers, the faint grease on her wrist. "Musician?" Evelyn raised one eyebrow. "What makes you think that?" "You entered during the piano solo, listened before ordering, and have the posture of someone accustomed to carrying something heavy." She glanced at the stage. "That could describe a cellist. Or a guitarist. Or a mechanic." His gaze dropped to the grease again. "A mechanic who smells like vanilla." Her pulse skipped. He had noticed her scent. The awareness in his eyes sharpened, almost predatory, but his expression remained calm. Evelyn leaned one elbow on the bar. "Corporate executive?" His eyebrow lifted. "Expensive shirt," she explained. Exhausted eyes. "Mild control problem. You inspected the glass like you were reviewing a hostile acquisition." He looked at the drink. The glass passed. "Congratulations to the glass." That earned her the smile. It transformed him. The severity cracked, revealing warmth, intelligence, and something dangerously magnetic. Evelyn felt the reaction low in her stomach and immediately resented him for it. He lifted his glass. "To surviving hostile formal wear." Her gaze narrowed. "How did you know?" "A piece of your enemy is still attached to your boot." She pulled the silk free and dropped it on the bar. "To surviving expectations," she corrected. He studied her for a moment, then touched his glass to hers. "To disappointing everyone efficiently." They drank. The singer moved into a faster number. Brushes whispered across drums. The room seemed to contract around the two of them. "So," Evelyn said, "what are you escaping from, executive?" A meeting. At midnight? It has lasted several months. That sounds less like a meeting and more like a hostage situation. There are similarities. Bad merger? The worst. She tilted her glass. You should refuse. So should you. He nodded toward the silk. Evelyn laughed softly. Mine involves family pressure, public spectacle, and a man I have never met. His fingers went still around his drink. A marriage? An arranged one. His gaze sharpened. Tomorrow? Technically today. He glanced toward the clock above the bar. It had passed midnight. A strange expression crossed his face, gone before she could name it. My condolences, he said. Accepted. What about your merger? He looked into his whiskey. It also becomes legally binding today. Evelyn stared at him, then laughed. The sound surprised both of them. Well, she said, that explains the eyes. What is wrong with my eyes? They look like they are planning an international incident. They usually plan peaceful negotiations. Usually? Tonight they are considering alternatives. She turned on the stool, knee brushing his. The contact sent a clean shock through her body. He felt it too. His gaze dropped to the point where they touched, and something hot moved behind his controlled expression. Evelyn did not pull away. What is she like? She asked. My future wife? The unfortunate merger partner. He exhaled slowly. According to every report, she is delicate, spoiled, and likely to cry if someone speaks above a whisper. Evelyn's mouth twitched. And you believe reports? I believe repeated evidence deserves consideration. Repeated gossip is still gossip. Spoken like someone with experience. Perhaps I have been called difficult. I find that easy to believe. She smiled sweetly. Perhaps you have been called unbearable. Frequently. At least the reports agree on something. He leaned closer, and the air between them tightened. What is your future husband like? Evelyn swirled her bourbon. A barbaric northern alpha. Violent, uncultured, probably eats without utensils and solves disagreements by throwing furniture. The stranger's face became perfectly blank. Furniture? Large furniture. An oddly specific accusation. I read it somewhere. And you believe reports? She lifted her glass toward him. Repeated evidence deserves consideration. He stared at her. Then, slowly, he laughed. It was quiet and rich and so unexpectedly genuine that Evelyn felt something inside her loosen. Neither of them understood the joke. That made it better. The band shifted into an old midnight standard. The melody slid between them, intimate and low. The stranger extended one large hand. I'm Tristan. Evelyn looked at it. She should have lied. Instead, she placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers with careful strength. The instant their skin touched, the room vanished. Heat rushed up her arm. Her breath caught. Tristan's blue eyes flashed with a brief ring of silver, bright and inhuman, before control slammed back into place. His grip tightened. Not enough to hurt. Enough to say he had felt it too. Evelyn, she said. He went utterly still. For one dangerous heartbeat, the truth hovered between them. Then the singer reached a high, aching note. Someone at a nearby table laughed, and Evelyn smiled as though her name were the most ordinary thing in the world. Tristan searched her face. She searched his. Neither saw the person they had been taught to dread. They saw only a runaway in a leather jacket and a weary executive with guarded eyes. Two strangers, hiding from the same dawn. Neither of them let go. Neither of them let go. Evelyn felt Tristan's thumb rest against the pulse in her wrist, exactly where her heartbeat had betrayed her by accelerating. His hand was warm, steady, and far too careful for a man built like a siege weapon. The silver flash in his eyes had vanished, but something in his expression remained alert, as if her name had brushed against a locked door in his memory. She waited for him to ask. He did not. Instead, he released her slowly and lifted his whiskey. Evelyn, he repeated. Tristan. They studied each other with the solemn concentration of two people pretending the exchange had been ordinary. The bartender returned. Evelyn pointed at Tristan's nearly empty glass. Another. I can purchase my own drink. I know. This one is charity. His eyebrow rose. Do I look financially distressed? No. Emotionally bankrupt. The bartender concealed a smile and reached for the bottle. Tristan turned his glass between his fingers. You have known me for approximately 11 minutes, and already the diagnosis is severe. Perhaps you should return to music. Perhaps you should return to being held hostage by your meeting. His mouth curved. The second whiskey arrived. Evelyn raised her bourbon. To bad decisions. I suspect we have already made several. Then we should at least be consistent. Their glasses touched. The alcohol warmed Evelyn's chest, but it was Tristan's attention that made the air feel dangerous. He watched her as if every careless word mattered. Most men in her world did the opposite. They listened for pauses in which they could mention their money, their influence, or their opinion of her legs. Tristan appeared to have noticed her legs. He also appeared intelligent enough not to announce it. That alone qualified him as an endangered species. He glanced down at the strip of ruined silk on the bar. How terrible is he? Who? The large furniture enthusiast. Evelyn groaned. Must we discuss him? You introduced the subject. I was emotionally vulnerable. You were insulting a stranger with great enthusiasm. That is how I express vulnerability. The band moved into a languid instrumental, the double bass pulsing beneath the conversation like a second heartbeat. Evelyn leaned closer, lowering her voice as if the walls might report her to the wedding committee. According to the files my family gave me, Tristan Blackwood is an uncivilized northern brute with the emotional range of a locked door. Tristan lifted his glass to hide his mouth. He is supposedly enormous, she continued. A devastating flaw. Violently enormous. An important distinction. He commands the northern pack through fear, intimidation, and a disturbing talent for making grown politicians lose control of their bladders. That sounds inefficient. Thank you. Finally, someone understands. His shoulders moved with a quiet chuckle. Evelyn warmed to her subject. He has probably never read a book that did not contain battle maps. Perhaps he reads other books upside down. Do not make excuses for him. I would not dare. He probably considers table manners a Southern conspiracy. Most forks are deeply suspicious. And I am told he once destroyed an entire conference room during a negotiation. Tristan's eyes gleamed. Was the furniture involved? 8 chairs and a marble table. Impressive. Barbaric. Was anyone injured? No. Then perhaps the furniture deserved it. Evelyn pointed at him. You are taking his side. I am defending the table's right to a fair trial. She laughed, and the sound rose above the saxophone before melting into the room. Tristan's smile faded into something quieter. He was watching her again. Not merely looking. Watching. What? She asked. Nothing. That was not a nothing expression. What does a nothing expression look like? Less interested. His gaze held hers. Perhaps I am interested. The directness of it tightened every nerve beneath her skin. Evelyn took another drink, mostly to give herself something to do. Well, she said, do not become too interested. I am nearly married. To a monster. An unwashed monster. Tristan nearly choked on his whiskey. Evelyn blinked. Are you all right? He coughed once into his fist. Perfectly. You look offended. I was merely surprised by the hygiene accusation. It is the North. People bathe in the North. So you claim. Frequently. Defensive for a corporate executive. I believe in regional fairness. She narrowed her eyes at him, then dismissed the thought. There are rumors he smells like pine smoke, steel, and violence. That is oddly poetic. I did not write the intelligence report. Clearly, your version would include furniture. My version would include a warning label. Tristan looked toward the stage, but his amusement remained visible in the line of his mouth. Evelyn wondered why making him laugh felt like a victory. And what? He asked. Does this report say about his intelligence? That he has none. None at all? His skull is apparently decorative. How unfortunate. I know. Imagine spending the rest of your life married to a mountain with fists. I imagine the mountain may have concerns of its own. Evelyn lifted her chin. About me? About the woman who escaped a guarded estate on a motorcycle after stabbing a wedding dress. I did not stab it. I liberated myself from it. Did the dress consent? It was complicit. Tristan laughed again, fuller this time. The sound did something unreasonable to her stomach. You find my suffering entertaining, she accused. I find your methods intoxicating. The word landed between them. Evelyn's lips parted. Tristan seemed to realize what he had said, but he did not retract it. His gaze dropped briefly to her mouth and returned to her eyes. The slow heat between them sharpened. She leaned nearer. Careful, executive. That almost sounded like flirting. Almost? You may need more practice. I am open to instruction. Her pulse stumbled. The bartender placed a fresh napkin beneath her glass, rescuing her from answering. Tristan took a measured sip. Since you have thoroughly assassinated the character of your future husband, fairness requires that I describe mine. Evelyn gestured grandly. Proceed. I promise to be compassionate. I doubt that. You wound me. My bride is Evelyn Vale. Her fingers tightened around her glass. The coincidence struck oddly, despite the obvious fact that her name was not unique. She reminded herself that Lumina Heights contained thousands of Evelyns, though perhaps not many engaged to Northern Alphas. Tristan continued before suspicion could settle. She is reportedly a pampered, useless, fragile porcelain doll. Evelyn stared at him. He seemed not to notice the danger. She has never held a job, he said. She spends her days attending fittings, charity lunches, and parties arranged for the specific purpose of photographing her arrival. The danger increased. Is that so? According to every available profile. And you believe profiles? Repeated evidence deserves consideration. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. Tristan drank calmly. She should have recognized the symmetry. She should have connected his name, his size, his strange silver eyes, his absence of fear, and the fact that his own arranged marriage became binding on the same day as hers. Instead, alcohol, exhaustion, and the sheer absurdity of the possibility protected the truth. The infamous Northern Alpha could not possibly be sitting beside her discussing suspicious forks. Her future husband was a brute. Tristan inspected glassware. Clearly different men. What else? She asked sweetly. She cries easily. Does she? If her hair is styled incorrectly. How tragic. If her nails chip. Devastating. If someone refuses to compliment her clothes. A national emergency. I am told she once dismissed a driver because the rain disturbed her mood. Evelyn smiled with all her teeth. That sounds credible. Tristan finally glanced at her. Something in her expression made him pause. You appear angry. I am sympathetic. That is your sympathetic face? It is one of them. He studied her for a beat, then continued with suspicious caution. She is also said to be helpless. Helpless. She likely cannot change a tire. Evelyn set down her bourbon. I see. Or operate anything more complicated than a jeweled compact. I see. Her family expects me to protect her from unpleasant weather, difficult conversations, and perhaps sharp corners. Evelyn nodded gravely. You poor man. Thank you. It must be terrifying to marry a woman who might cry if a butterfly lands too aggressively near her. Exactly. Perhaps you should carry emergency smelling salts. I have ordered them in bulk. And cushions. Every room will be padded. She may still injure herself on her own uselessness. That is my greatest fear. Evelyn's stare could have melted iron. Tristan held it for 3 seconds. Then he saw the grease on her wrist, the riding boots, the ruined silk, and the expression of a woman contemplating whether a whiskey bottle could be used as a blunt instrument. His eyes began to brighten. You are enjoying this, she said. Immensely. You do not believe any of it. Not anymore. The answer softened her anger before she could prevent it. Why not? Because gossip has just informed me that a barbaric northern idiot cannot read. while the woman delivering that judgment quoted 3 political philosophers in the first half hour of our conversation. I quoted 2. You referenced the 3rd, indirectly. She stared at him. He smiled. I listen. That simple statement reached somewhere the bourbon had not. Evelyn looked away. The singer on stage finished her song. Applause rolled through the lounge. What if the reports about your bride are wrong? Evelyn asked. Tristan's expression changed. What if she is nothing like the porcelain doll people describe? Then I owe her an apology. Only one? A substantial one. With flowers? I dislike cut flowers. Of course you do. They die in decorative bowls. You make romance sound like a sanitation problem. Potted plants are more responsible. Evelyn laughed under her breath. You are astonishingly strange. I have been told. What if she is strong? His eyes returned to hers. Then I would respect her. What if she does not want the marriage? The humor left his face. Then I would not force her. The answer came without hesitation. Evelyn went still. You would break the treaty? If the alternative were chaining someone to me against her will, yes. That could cost you everything. Power that requires captivity is not power worth keeping. The room seemed to quiet around them. Evelyn searched his face for performance and found none. The Northern Alpha in her reports would never have said such a thing. He would have demanded obedience, territory, heirs, and gratitude. This man spoke of freedom as though it were sacred. Your bride may be luckier than she knows, Evelyn said. Tristan's gaze lowered. I doubt she would agree. She has not met you. Neither have I met her. Then perhaps you are both cowards. He looked up. Evelyn lifted one shoulder. You are judging strangers because it is easier than admitting you are afraid. Afraid? Of being trapped, of disappointing everyone, of waking up beside someone who sees only the role you perform. Tristan regarded her with unnerving stillness. And you? He asked. I am terrified. The admission escaped before she could dress it in humor. His expression gentled. Evelyn looked down at her hands. Not of him, exactly. Of disappearing. Of becoming Lady Blackwood, treaty bride, decorative symbol, and eventually a footnote in someone else's dynasty. You do not strike me as easy to erase. People have been practicing for years. Tristan said nothing for a moment. Then he reached across the bar and turned her hand palm upward. His touch was deliberate and restrained, yet it sent heat through her entire body. They failed, he said. Evelyn met his eyes. Tonight, he continued, you cut yourself out of a dress built to contain you. You escaped armed guards. You rode into the neutral zone alone. You insulted one of the most dangerous men in the country while drinking bourbon in a cellar. Underground lounge. Cellar with music? You are ruining the atmosphere. You are not disappearing, Evelyn. His thumb brushed lightly across her palm. You are becoming impossible to ignore. She forgot how to breathe. They remained like that until the bartender appeared with the bill. Evelyn looked at Tristan's hand over hers, then at his face, then at the clock. The night was moving too quickly. She pulled out a folded note. Shots! Tristan glanced at her. That seems unwise. We are mourning. What exactly? Our mutual march toward the graveyard of arranged marriages. I thought you were escaping. Temporarily. Then perhaps we should remain capable of walking. Coward! He sighed. 1. 2. 1. 3. Your negotiation strategy is unusual. 2. He considered her. Agreed. The bartender poured clear amber liquor into 2 small glasses. Evelyn lifted hers. To your delicate porcelain bride. Tristan lifted his. To your unwashed northern brute. May they be less terrible than reported. May we be less foolish than we appear. They drank. The first shot burned. The second burned worse. Evelyn coughed and accused Tristan of choosing poison. Tristan calmly informed her that she had ordered it. By the time they left the Velvet Room, the city had gone silent. The streets of the neutral zone gleamed beneath pale lamps. Rain had fallen earlier, leaving the pavement dark and reflective. Somewhere above, towers pierced the clouds, but down here the old buildings leaned close together, their brick walls softened by ivy and age. Tristan held the door open for her. Evelyn stopped on the step. "You are remarkably civilized for a man who defends furniture destruction." "I contain multitudes. You also inspected the door handle before touching it. It appeared untrustworthy. You are afraid of germs. I am appropriately cautious. You are a germaphobe." "Mildly," she grinned. "This is the best thing I have learned all night. I deeply regret honesty." They began walking without discussing a destination. For the first block, their shoulders brushed occasionally. For the second, neither moved away. Evelyn told him about rebuilding engines in the greenhouse garage, while her family believed she was practicing floral arrangement. Tristan listened with undisguised fascination and asked questions intelligent enough to prove he understood torque, compression, and mechanical timing. "You know engines," she said. "I restore old cars. Personally, when my counsel is not supervising my breathing, so the corporate executive gets grease under his nails. Never beneath them." She laughed. "Naturally." He told her about studying history, diplomacy, and classical music, about sneaking into jazz clubs as a university student because the improvisation fascinated him, about believing that the most honest conversations happened between musicians who had no plan beyond listening to one another. Evelyn looked at him differently after that, not as a handsome stranger, as a man whose mind moved with quiet precision. He noticed details, challenged assumptions, and used humor like a blade wrapped in velvet. He never interrupted her, never softened his intelligence to flatter hers, never seemed threatened when she disagreed. Tristan, meanwhile, watched Evelyn transform beneath the streetlights. She was fearless without being careless, sharp without being cruel, and fiercely independent without pretending she needed no one. Her thoughts moved quickly, leaping from machines to politics to music. She questioned every rule he had been trained to accept. She was everything the reports claimed his future bride could never be. She was everything he had secretly wanted. At a deserted crossing, Evelyn stepped into the road before the light changed. Tristan caught her gently by the waist. A silent vehicle swept past. She turned within the circle of his arm. His hand spanned her side. Her palms rested against his chest. The night stopped. They stood close enough to share breath. Tristan's eyes darkened. Evelyn felt the restrained power in his body, the impossible control with which he held her, as though she were both strong and precious. "You do know," she whispered, "that I am not fragile. I am beginning to suspect it." Then let go. His fingers tightened slightly. "You first." Neither moved. The empty city stretched around them, full of locked doors, false names, and approaching dawn. Evelyn's gaze dropped to his mouth. Tristan inhaled, and the faint scent of vanilla and motor oil filled his senses. Something ancient inside him rose and recognized her. Not by title, not by treaty, by truth. He lowered his head. She lifted her face. And somewhere in the distance, a clock began striking one. And somewhere in the distance, a clock began striking one. The sound traveled through Lumina Heights in slow, solemn waves, each note rolling between the towers and fading over the river. Tristan remained motionless, his arm still wrapped around Evelyn's waist, his face close enough that the warmth of his breath touched her lips. One movement would have erased the last space between them. Evelyn could feel the decision gathering in him. His body had gone rigid with restraint, every hard line of muscle held under impossible control. Beneath her palms, his heart struck with a force that contradicted the calm expression he was trying to maintain. She wondered if he could feel hers answering. The stranger she had met only hours ago had become more real than anyone waiting for her at home. He had listened to her without condescension. He had matched her sarcasm without trying to silence it. He had looked at her grease-stained wrist and torn wedding silk as though they were evidence of strength rather than disgrace. Now his eyes were fixed on her mouth. The clock finished its final chime. Neither of them moved away. "You are thinking too much," Evelyn whispered. Tristan's fingers tightened slightly at her waist. "That has been said before. By your employees? Usually by people attempting to win arguments. Do they? No. She smiled, but the smile trembled at the edges. His gaze softened. You should not look at me like that, she said. Like what? As if you are memorizing me. His silence answered more honestly than words. The night had sharpened every detail of him in her mind. The dark hair that refused to remain perfectly arranged. The severe line of his jaw. The faint crease between his brows whenever he considered something carefully. The absurd way he avoided touching door handles. The intelligence he tried to hide beneath dry humor. Tomorrow, she would marry a man described as the opposite of everything Tristan seemed to be. A violent alpha who ruled through fear. A brainless northern brute. A stranger chosen because her family needed his power more than they needed her happiness. Her fingers curled into the fabric of Tristan's shirt. Until sunrise, she said. He looked at her. That is all we have, she continued. No questions after that. No consequences. No pretending this can become anything. The offer sounded reckless even to her. Perhaps that was why it felt honest. Tristan lowered his head another fraction. Evelyn rose onto her toes. Their mouths were almost touching when a vehicle swept through the intersection behind them. Its headlights passed over their faces, exposing them in harsh white light before sliding away. The spell cracked. Tristan stepped back first. His hand left her waist. The loss of his touch felt immediate and physical, like warmth being pulled from her skin. Evelyn folded her arms. Responsible, she said bitterly. I am trying. You should stop. I do not think I can. You escaped an entire security detail. That required planning. This requires judgment. And you prefer planning? Infinitely. She turned away before he could see how deeply the withdrawal had hurt. The empty street stretched before them, wet from an earlier rain. Lamps glowed against the pavement. A faint breeze moved between the old buildings, carrying the scent of stone, river water, and bread from some bakery preparing for morning. Tristan fell into step beside her. They walked without touching. For the first time since leaving the velvet room, silence did not feel comfortable. It pressed between them, full of the kiss that had not happened. Evelyn shoved her hands into her jacket pockets. You never answered my question, she said. Which one? What exactly happens if you refuse your merger? Tristan's expression changed. The humor vanished first, then the softness. What remained was the face of a man accustomed to carrying information too dangerous to share. The arrangement is connected to a territorial agreement, he said. Corporate territory? Not entirely. She glanced at him. That sounds ominous. It is. He kept his eyes on the road ahead. The groups involved have been in conflict for years. Some of the disputes are financial. Others are older, personal. The marriage gives both sides a reason to respect boundaries they would otherwise challenge. And if you do not marry her, the agreement collapses. People lose money. People lose their lives. Evelyn stopped walking. Tristan took another step before turning back. The city seemed suddenly colder. You mean that literally, she said. Yes. How many? I do not know. The answer came quietly, but it carried more weight than any number could have. Tristan looked toward the distant skyline. There are factions waiting for weakness. If the treaty fails, they will claim the other side acted in bad faith. Patrols will move into disputed neighborhoods. Retaliations will follow. People who have spent years learning restraint will convince themselves that violence is necessary again. You are responsible for stopping that? I am responsible for the people who will stand in the first line when it begins. Evelyn searched his face. The exhausted corporate executive disappeared for a moment. In his place stood someone harder and older than 33. A man who knew exactly what orders cost after they were given. What do you want? She asked. His eyes returned to hers. Tonight? No, in your life. The question unsettled him more than she expected. After a long pause, he said, Peace. That sounds simple. It is not. What else? A home where people do not enter carrying agendas. She smiled faintly. Ambitious. I have been told. A wife who does not cry over chipped nails? His mouth shifted, but the humor did not fully return. A wife who tells me when I am wrong. That may require a full-time employee. I was hoping for someone overqualified. Evelyn looked away. The answer hurt because it sounded so much like the position she would have wanted. Not a decoration, not a treaty bride, a partner. Then perhaps your porcelain doll will surprise you, she said. Perhaps. You do not sound hopeful. Neither do you. They resumed walking. The darkness above the city had begun to change. Black softened into deep blue, and the outlines of rooftops emerged more clearly. Dawn was still distant, but no longer avoidable. Evelyn felt it approaching like a sentence. What happens if you refuse? Tristan asked. She pretended not to understand. Refuse what? The wedding. My mother explodes. I suspect Lumina Heights would survive. My father may not. Tristan waited. She hated how easily his silence drew truth from her. The Vale Empire is failing, she said. His head turned sharply. Failing how? Debt, overexpansion, bad investments, worse leadership. But your family controls half the luxury holdings in the city. On paper. And in reality? In reality, 3 divisions are operating on emergency credit. 2 properties are mortgaged beyond their value. And the board is preparing to remove my father the moment the wedding agreement appears uncertain. Tristan's jaw tightened. The marriage brings capital? Capital, political protection, and confidence. Banks do not care whether a bride is happy. They care whether the Northern Alliance signs the documents. And if you run, the deal collapses. Your family loses its fortune. That would be the least important consequence. He studied her. Evelyn exhaled slowly. Thousands of people work for our companies, she said. Most of them had nothing to do with the decisions that created this disaster. If the lenders move tomorrow, entire departments close before the end of the week. That is not your failure. No. Then why are you paying for it? Because they will. Her voice came sharper than she intended. She stopped near the entrance to a narrow park and faced him. My father will lose houses he never visits. My mother will lose jewelry she does not remember buying. The executives who approved every bad decision will negotiate generous exits. And the employees? They lose salaries, insurance, homes, stability. Tristan's expression had gone very still. I can hate the marriage and still understand the cost of refusing it, Evelyn said. Those 2 truths do not cancel each other. No, he replied. They make the choice crueler. She looked at him. He understood. That was the worst of it. If he had told her to run, she could have dismissed him as reckless. If he had told her duty mattered more than happiness, she could have hated him. Instead, he understood exactly why she had to return. They continued toward the river. The streets widened as the old district opened around them. The buildings grew lower, revealing more of the sky. A silver edge appeared behind the eastern towers. Evelyn slowed. So that is it, she said. We both return. Yes. You prevent a war. You prevent a collapse. And we spend the rest of our lives wondering whether the rumors were right. Tristan looked down at her. They rarely are. Then perhaps your bride will be brilliant. Perhaps your husband bathes. She laughed despite herself. The sound broke halfway through. Tristan reached for her, then stopped before touching her. That restraint hurt more than contact would have. They reached the bridge as the first pale light touched the city. It was an old iron structure spanning the river between the neutral zone and the central district. During the day, it would be crowded with traffic and pedestrians. Now it belonged to them. They walked to the middle and stopped beside the railing. The river below moved slowly, carrying broken reflections of the lamps. Beyond it, Lumina Heights rose in glass and stone, waiting for morning to expose every polished surface. Evelyn rested her hands on the cold metal. Tristan stood close behind her, not touching, close enough that she could feel his presence like heat. This is where we separate, she said. I know. Your car is west. Your estate is east. Efficient. Cruel. She closed her eyes. Wind moved across the bridge. lifting her hair. One loose strand caught against her lips. Tristan reached around her. His fingers brushed the strand away. The touch was gentle enough to break her heart. Evelyn turned. His hand remained against her cheek. Dawn painted silver along the edges of his face. His eyes looked darker in the new light, stripped of the amusement that had protected him all night. She leaned into his palm. Tristan's breath changed. He stepped closer. Evelyn's back pressed against the railing. His body did not touch hers, but the space between them vanished until there were only millimeters left. His thumb moved along her cheekbone. Her hands rose to his chest. The tension that had followed them from the lounge tightened to the edge of pain. "Kiss me," she whispered. His eyes closed briefly. When they opened again, they held a hunger so controlled that it frightened her more than recklessness would have. "If I do," he said, "I will ask you not to go." "Ask. I will mean it." "So will I." His forehead lowered to hers. Their mouths hovered one breath apart. Evelyn could already imagine the kiss. It would not be careful. They had spent too long being careful. It would contain every unfinished sentence, every brush of shoulders, every moment of attraction denied by circumstance. Tristan's fingers slid into her hair. She lifted her chin. Then the first ray of sunlight broke between the towers. It touched the bridge. It struck the river. It illuminated the face of the man she could not choose. Reality returned all at once. Board meetings, security teams, marriage contracts, territorial maps, employees waiting for paychecks, pack families waiting for peace. Evelyn's lips trembled. Tristan felt it. Neither moved forward. Slowly, painfully, he lowered his hand. Evelyn released his shirt. They stepped apart. The distance was barely a foot. It felt like exile. "I hate us," Evelyn said. Tristan's voice was rough. "We are behaving honorably." "I hate that too." "I know." "Responsible adults are unbearable. Frequently." She looked toward the eastern end of the bridge. "If I know how to find you, I might try." Tristan followed her gaze. "Yes. So we should not exchange anything else. No addresses, no company names, no telephone numbers. We already exchanged first names. Common names. Tristan is not that common. Do not ruin this with statistics." His mouth curved faintly. Evelyn swallowed. "You cannot tell me who you really are," she said, "and I will not tell you anything that makes finding me easier." "You are Evelyn Vale." The name slipped from him. She turned quickly. Tristan held still. For one dangerous second, recognition waited between them. Then Evelyn shook her head. "Vale is not exactly a secret in this city. No. You must have read about the wedding. Yes. And your bride is also named Evelyn Vale. Yes." The coincidence hovered close to revelation. Exhaustion and pain pushed it aside. Evelyn gave a hollow laugh. "Perhaps there are too many doomed Evelyns in Lumina Heights." "Perhaps." He did not tell her that there could only be one. She did not ask why his face had become so unreadable. Tristan reached inside his pocket. He withdrew a heavy vintage lighter made of darkened silver. A small compass rose was engraved on one side, its edges worn smooth by years of use. He placed it in her palm. The weight surprised her. "This is not a cheap souvenir," she said. "No, it looks old. It belonged to my grandfather." Evelyn looked up. "Then I cannot take it." "You can." "Why?" "So you have something from tonight that cannot be explained away as exhaustion." Her thumb traced the engraving. "Do you smoke?" "No." "Then why carry a lighter? To remember that fire is useful only when controlled." "That sounds like something a very serious man would say." "I am occasionally serious. Constantly." "Keep it." She closed her fingers around the metal. It was still warm from his body. Tristan looked toward the distant streets, then back at her. "If your barbaric husband ever mistreats you, return to the Velvet Room." Evelyn tried to smile. "And what will happen?" "I will be waiting." "You may be occupied with your fragile bride. She can survive one evening without supervision." "What if he locks me in a tower?" "I will remove the tower." "With peaceful negotiation?" "If possible." "And if not?" His gaze turned cold enough to reveal the power beneath his civilized restraint. Then with less peaceful methods. Evelyn believed him. That should have frightened her. Instead, it made tears burn behind her eyes. She pressed the lighter to her chest. "Do not be kind," she said. "Why?" "Because I can survive leaving someone charming. I cannot survive leaving someone good." Pain moved across his face. "I am not as good as you think." "Neither am I. You returned for people who may never know what you sacrificed. You are marrying a stranger to prevent a war." They stood in silence, unable to argue against the evidence of each other. Evelyn stepped forward. She rose onto her toes and rested her forehead against his. Tristan closed his eyes. Their hands found each other, fingers interlocking tightly. No kiss, only breath, only warmth, only the unbearable intimacy of restraint. "Goodbye, executive," she whispered. "Goodbye, musician. I am not a musician. You listen like one, and you are not only an executive." "No." She waited. He offered nothing more. That was the promise between them. Evelyn released his hands first. Tristan let her. They turned in opposite directions. She walked east toward her family, its debts, and the monster waiting at the altar. He walked west toward his pack, its enemies, and the porcelain bride who feared him. Every step felt wrong. At the end of the bridge, Evelyn stopped. Across the distance, Tristan stopped too. They turned at the same moment. For several seconds, they simply looked at each other beneath the widening dawn. Then an early city bus crossed between them. When it passed, Tristan was gone. Evelyn pressed the vintage lighter against her heart and forced herself to continue. On the western bank, Tristan entered the empty street and did not allow himself to look back again. They marched toward duty with the grief of people leaving behind the only future they had ever truly wanted. Neither understood that the road ahead was carrying them toward the same altar. Neither understood that the road ahead was carrying them toward the same altar. By 10 in the morning, the cathedral bells were shaking the sky above Lumina Heights. Their deep, measured tolls rolled across the city with the weight of history, money, and obligation. Crowds packed the surrounding plazas behind polished security barriers. Cameras occupied every permitted angle. Black vehicles lined the cathedral steps, delivering politicians, industrialists, pack leaders, aristocrats, and members of families whose fortunes had survived wars, scandals, and generations of carefully arranged marriages. Inside, thousands of white flowers climbed the stone columns. Their perfume was overwhelming. The cathedral itself seemed built to make individuals feel small. Its vaulted ceiling disappeared into shadow. Stained glass windows threw pale colors across the marble floor. Rows of powerful guests sat beneath carved wolves and saints, whispering about market stability, territorial peace, and the historic union that would reshape the balance of power across the North. No one spoke about love. Love had never been listed among the treaty provisions. Evelyn stood behind the cathedral doors beneath enough silk to bury her. Her ruined wedding dress had been discovered before sunrise, and the bridal staff had reacted as if she had burned down a national monument. Fortunately, the Vale family did not believe in owning only one extravagant solution to any problem. A replacement gown had been summoned from a secure storage room. It was larger than the first. Layers of ivory fabric spread around her like frozen waves. Pearls covered the bodice. Silver thread weighed down the sleeves. The skirt required 4 attendants to arrange it, while a cathedral-length train flowed behind her beneath a veil so thick she could barely see the marble floor. The corset was tighter. Her mother called that an improvement. "You will not lift your head until you reach the altar," Celeste Vale instructed, adjusting a diamond pin near Evelyn's temple. The veil must remain forward until the ceremonial blessing. Evelyn stared through the fabric at her own white-gloved hands. The vintage lighter was hidden beneath the flowers in her bouquet. She had refused to surrender it. 3 stylists had objected to the weight. Her mother had demanded to know why she needed an old piece of metal during the ceremony. Evelyn had replied that it was a personal symbol of restraint. For once, no one had understood her well enough to argue. Now the lighter rested against her palm, heavy and warm from the grip she had maintained throughout the drive. Proof that the night had happened. Proof that somewhere in the city existed a man who had listened to her. A man who knew she rebuilt motorcycles and despised decorative captivity. A man who might return to the velvet room and wait beneath the amber lights, never realizing that the woman he had almost kissed was trapped behind cathedral doors. Her executive. The thought nearly broke her. A bridal attendant touched her arm. "Miss Vale, it is time." Evelyn inhaled. The corset resisted. She remembered Tristan telling her she was impossible to erase. Then the great doors opened. Music thundered through the cathedral. Every guest rose. Evelyn lowered her head and began the silent march toward her future. At the far end of the aisle, Tristan stood before the altar in a formal white suit that fit him with brutal perfection. He had returned to the hotel at dawn. His security detail had found him entering the underground garage and surrounded him with the horrified relief usually reserved for survivors of natural disasters. His chief of security had demanded explanations. The council had demanded assurances. The tailor had demanded that he stop moving. Tristan had given them nothing. He had showered, dressed, signed the preliminary documents, and endured 2 hours of warnings about the consequences of hesitation. He had not mentioned the woman on the bridge. He had not mentioned vanilla, motor oil, gray eyes, or the fact that he had come within a breath of abandoning everything for a stranger. By the time he entered the cathedral, his face had become a mask. The guests interpreted his cold expression as alpha authority. His counsel interpreted it as acceptance. Only Tristan knew that he felt dead. He stood beside the priest with his shoulders squared and his hands clasped behind his back. His formal tie felt like a restraint around his throat. The northern signet ring weighed on his finger. Beneath the white suit, every muscle in his body remained rigid with the effort required not to walk out. He had ordered discreet inquiries about the woman from the velvet room. Then, he had canceled them. She had asked not to be found. He would honor that request, even if honoring it condemned him to spend the rest of his life imagining a different sunrise. The bridal music swelled. The doors opened. Tristan looked straight ahead. He saw only an enormous veil moving slowly down the aisle. He refused to study the woman beneath it. His future wife deserved dignity, even if neither of them wanted this arrangement. He would treat her fairly. He would protect her. He would never frighten or humiliate her. He would build separate apartments if she requested them. He would negotiate every term of their life. He would not resent her for failing to be the woman he had met in the dark. That promise was the only gift he could offer. Evelyn moved between the rows of watching elites. Each step sounded like a door closing. She could feel thousands of eyes following her. Some guests admired the dress. Others assessed the financial meaning of her marriage. PAC representatives watched for weakness. Human investors watched for confidence. No one looked for the woman beneath the veil. The aisle seemed endless. Evelyn kept her gaze on the marble. She saw the edge of her train, the tips of her shoes, and flashes of colored light crossing the floor. She heard the whispers. Beautiful, perfect, historic, fortunate girl. Her hand tightened around the bouquet. Fortunate. She had found the right man hours too late. Now she was walking toward the wrong one. At the altar, Tristan listened to the measured rhythm of her approach. He could hear more than the human guests could. The scrape of shoes against stone, the rustle of expensive fabric, the quick, anxious heartbeats among the Vale family, the controlled breathing of armed guards hidden behind decorative screens. Then the floral perfume reached him. Roses, white lilies, orange blossom, an aggressive cloud designed by someone who had mistaken expense for subtlety. Tristan's nose tightened. The bride moved closer. Beneath the flowers, he detected something else. Something faint, warm, impossible, vanilla. His heart stopped. The scent disappeared beneath the lilies. Tristan lifted his head. The veiled figure was halfway up the final steps. His wolf surged so violently that silver flashed through his eyes. No, it could not be. Then he caught the second note. Metal, leather, the unmistakable trace of motor oil. Every sound in the cathedral vanished beneath the roar of his blood. The bride reached the altar. Her father placed her hand into Tristan's. The instant their skin touched through the thin glove, Heat tore through him. The same heat from the bar, the same impossible recognition. Tristan looked down at the heavy veil. Protocol required the priest to begin the blessing before it was lifted. Tristan did not care. He seized the fabric with one hand. A council member hissed his title in warning. The priest raised both palms. Evelyn gasped as Tristan violently ripped the veil back. Pearl pins scattered across the marble. The heavy fabric flew over her head and collapsed behind her in a shimmering heap. She lifted her face. Gray eyes met blue. The cathedral froze. For one suspended heartbeat, Evelyn could not understand what she was seeing. The man at the altar was enormous, broad-shouldered, and devastating in his formal white suit. A black signet ring marked him as the Northern Alpha. Power radiated from him so strongly that every wolf in the cathedral had lowered their gaze. But she knew the severe jaw. She knew the dark hair. She knew the eyes that had watched her laugh in the amber darkness. "Executive," she breathed. Tristan stared at her. The bride beneath the veil was not a weeping porcelain doll. She was the woman from the velvet room. The woman on the bridge. The woman he had almost chosen over peace. "Musician," he said. Evelyn's bouquet slipped from her fingers. It struck the marble, spilling white flowers across the altar steps. The vintage lighter slid free and landed between them with a heavy metallic sound. Tristan looked down. The compass rose caught the stained glass light. Something inside him broke open. A laugh erupted from his chest. It was not polite. It was not controlled. It was a deep, astonished, utterly joyful sound that echoed through the cathedral and caused hundreds of powerful people to stare at him in horror. The cold, bloodthirsty Northern Alpha was laughing at his own wedding. Tristan threw his formal tie onto the floor. Several council members stood. His chief advisor whispered, "Alpha, the ceremony. The ceremony can wait." Evelyn stared at him, shock transforming into radiant, uncontainable joy. "You," she said. "Me. You are Tristan Blackwood, and you are Evelyn Vale. The fragile doll? The unwashed brute?" Her mouth fell open. Then she laughed. The sound joined his beneath the vaulted ceiling, bright and rebellious and entirely inappropriate. Guests began whispering in alarm. Evelyn barely heard them. Every detail of the night rearranged itself in her memory. His size, his authority, the silver in his eyes, his knowledge of Northern territory, his careful defense of the barbarian she had insulted. "You let me say you could not read. I was waiting to hear how much worse it became. I said your skull was decorative. You also questioned my bathing habits. Do you blame me? The reports were very specific. I bathed this morning. How reassuring." The priest looked helplessly toward the families. Celeste Vale appeared close to fainting, perhaps for the first sincere time in her life. Tristan stepped over the fallen flowers. His hands closed around Evelyn's delicate waist. The thick gown crumpled beneath his fingers as he pulled her against him. Her breath caught. The humor in his eyes darkened into the desire he had restrained on the bridge. "You threatened me last night," he murmured. "I made several threats. You said that if your barbaric husband touched you without permission, you would use pepper spray." Evelyn's pulse raced beneath his hand. "I may have said something similar." His mouth lowered toward hers. The entire cathedral leaned into the silence. Tristan's lips hovered a breath away. "Then you had better use it now." Evelyn slid both arms around his neck. "I seem to have left it in my other wedding dress." That was all the permission he needed. Tristan kissed her. The first contact was not gentle. It contained every moment they had denied themselves. The bar stool where their knees had touched. The empty street where his arm had circled her waist. The bridge where they had chosen duty over desire. His mouth claimed hers with breathtaking certainty. Evelyn answered without hesitation. Her fingers slid into his dark hair. His grip tightened around her waist, lifting her onto the tips of her shoes as the enormous skirt spread around them. The kiss deepened, dominant and desperate, yet threaded with the same careful control that had drawn her to him from the beginning. She tasted joy, whiskey remembered from the night before, and the wild edge of the alpha he had hidden beneath gentlemanly restraint. Tristan tasted vanilla, defiance, and home. A scandalized murmur swept through the cathedral. The priest cleared his throat. Neither of them stopped. One of the Vale relatives dropped a ceremonial program. A Northern Council elder whispered that protocol had been abandoned. Tristan kissed Evelyn more deeply. The wolf inside him had recognized her before his mind understood. Now the mating bond surged between them, golden and fierce, no longer restrained by mistaken identities or inherited fear. When they finally separated, Evelyn was breathless. Tristan kept one arm locked around her waist, as if the cathedral might attempt to take her away. Her lipstick marked his mouth. His carefully arranged hair was ruined. They had never looked more suited to each other. "You knew my name," Evelyn whispered. "I knew the name of my bride. I did not know she was you. You heard me insult you for hours. I considered correcting you." "When?" "After the furniture accusation." "That part may still be true." The conference table was structurally unsound. She laughed again and rested her forehead against his. "What happens now?" Tristan looked around the cathedral. Human financiers were staring at them. Pack leaders were whispering. Their families appeared unable to decide whether they had witnessed a disaster or a miracle. The treaty documents remained ready. The marriage still protected the North. It still secured the Vale companies, but the prison had vanished. Tristan turned back to Evelyn. "Now I marry the woman I chose before I knew she was mine." Possessive heat flashed in his eyes, but his voice softened. "Only if she still chooses me." Evelyn looked at the man she had believed she was losing forever. The feared alpha who wanted peace. The corporate executive who restored old cars. The gentleman who inspected glasses, carried a lighter he did not use, and had offered to tear down a tower for her. She touched the signet ring on his hand. "I choose the unwashed brute. I bathe regularly. We will discuss your defensive attitude later. Is that a yes?" She rose onto her toes. "Yes." Tristan smiled. It was not the restrained curve she had earned at the bar. It was open, brilliant, and triumphant. He retrieved the lighter from the marble and placed it back into her hand. "You returned it quickly. I followed your instructions. My barbaric husband touched me. And," she tucked the lighter against his chest, "I believe I can handle him." The priest cleared his throat again, louder this time. "Shall we continue?" Tristan looked at Evelyn. She looked at him. Together, they turned toward the altar. "Yes," they said. The ceremony that followed bore little resemblance to the solemn political performance everyone had planned. Evelyn refused to lower the veil again. Tristan refused another tie. They interrupted the formal vows twice to correct language suggesting ownership. When the priest asked whether Evelyn would obey, Tristan informed him that the word had been removed from the negotiated agreement. Evelyn added that it had also been removed from reality. By the time they exchanged rings, the cathedral's horror had transformed into bewildered fascination. When they were pronounced husband and wife, Tristan kissed her again. This time the guests were prepared. Most still stared. A few began to applaud. The sound spread slowly through the cathedral until human allies, pack representatives, employees, relatives, and even several skeptical council members rose to their feet. Not because the treaty had succeeded, because for once, duty and desire had stopped being enemies. Months later, the Velvet Room reserved the last 2 stools at the bar every week. Evelyn arrived on her motorcycle. Tristan arrived in his restored vintage car. Sometimes they argued about which machine deserved the safer parking space. Sometimes she accused him of terrifying the glassware. Sometimes he reminded her that she had publicly described his head as decorative. They always stayed until closing. The Vale companies stabilized under Evelyn's leadership, not her father's. Tristan supported her restructuring plans, but never tried to control them. In return, she challenged his counsel, questioned ancient pack laws, and introduced enough uncomfortable logic to drag several northern traditions into the modern age. The disputed territories remained peaceful. The marriage that had been designed as a cage became a partnership neither family had possessed the imagination to arrange. Fate loved tricks. It dressed freedom as duty and hid tenderness beneath terrifying reputations. It sent two fugitives into the same underground room, allowed them to complain about each other over expensive liquor, and waited until the final possible moment to reveal the joke. But fate had not created their love. They had done that themselves. They had found each other without titles, fortunes, bloodlines, or treaties. They had met in the dark as two exhausted strangers and recognized the truths the daylight world had buried beneath rumor. Tristan had seen Evelyn's strength before he saw her family name. Evelyn had seen Tristan's gentleness before she saw his alpha ring. That was why the revelation at the altar did not begin their love. It merely gave their love permission to survive. True soulmates were not people who made life simple. They were the ones who made sacrifice meaningful, honesty irresistible, and freedom possible even inside responsibility. They were the ones who could find each other in the darkest hour, when every road appeared to lead toward captivity. And sometimes, when fate was feeling particularly mischievous, the road to a prison sentence ended at the same altar as the road to a lifelong sanctuary. If you enjoyed this steamy, romantic, and thrilling paranormal romance audiobook, please hit the like button and subscribe for more epic stories.